to the Point of Impact podcast with Rick McDaniel. Thanks for joining us today. Get ready to be inspired and motivated to live a high-impact life. Now, here's Rick.
Welcome to the Point of Impact podcast. I'm Rick McDaniel. It's great to have you joining with us today. And today's kind of special. Generally, we record these podcasts in advance, but current events are bringing us to a situation where we're going to do one here, record it, and we're going to put it live out for you to hear about, because what took place on Monday night when Indiana University won the national championship in college football is just such an unbelievable story. And the coach, Curt Cignetti, particularly, his story is so remarkable that it really needs to be told. And let me just give you a little background before we jump in. So it all started with a simple LinkedIn post that I did the next day, just talking about a little tiny bit about his story, about how he didn't even become a head coach till he was 50 and didn't become a head coach of a major college program until he's 62. And at that point, he got the program that he got was Indiana, which was the losingest major college football program in history. No school ever lost as many games as Indiana has lost in football over those years. Now, it's kind of funny. This year, Northwestern actually passed them, as Indiana didn't lose any games and Northwestern did. But when the season started, they were the losingest program. When he got the job, they were the losingest program in college football history. So I just did a little post about that, about basically saying, hey, it's not too late. You're not too old. You can still be successful. And that little tiny one paragraph post absolutely exploded in one of these viral moments. And the last time I looked, it was like 230,000 people or something like that. It had been reshared all kinds of times. And then that led to Fox News saying, hey, you need to write about this. You need to write a piece about this. So I went and wrote a piece, and unlike anyone I've ever done for Fox, they're like, listen, you need to get this done today. We want to publish it tomorrow morning. So then that piece went out. It's not too late. You're not too old. National champion coach Curt Cignetti just proved it. So that went out, and then my producer here for our podcast is like, we got to do a podcast about this. This has obviously touched people in a huge way, and so many of the comments on LinkedIn are just so powerful. Just people saying, hey, this really encourages me. I really needed to hear this, and I'm so happy that you shared this because it's so true. You're never too old, and it's not too late for you. And it just became such an encouraging thing. And so here we are. Instead of doing the podcast that we had recorded for this week, for today, we're gonna do this one instead, and just stay in the moment here and try to help as many people as possible. I mean, I am the inspiration, motivation guy. That's what I do. I'm here to encourage people. And as I watched Cignetti's season and learned more and more about him and found out, his story, and I'm like, man, if this guy ever wins the championship, this will just be so incredible. Really, if he hadn't won, it still would have been incredible. But, you got to win in America. And once he won on Monday night, I'm like, I should just, say something about it, encourage people. I never ever knew it would turn into something like this that it's turned into. It's just been absolutely unbelievable. So if you want to read the article, just go to foxnews.com and type in my name, and you can read the article about that I wrote, or you can continue to listen. I hope you'll listen and read. I mean, really, it's basically the article is a much shorter version of what we'll talk about now. And so I think if you read the article, it'll be a great summary, and you can share that with a lot of people. And then people that like to listen to podcasts, you can share this with them. So let's just jump in here today and just share with you this amazing story. And I would just almost say it like this: overlooked to undefeated. Overlooked to undefeated. That's a great way to just think about this guy, from overlooked to undefeated. And that's what you'll hear about the story about today. So here's this sort of like out of the movies, unbelievable but true story, which is that the college football program that had the most losses all time of any major college football team when this season started, went undefeated, won 16 games, which had not happened until the late 1800s in the early part of football. And that now it's just unbelievable. All these years later, what Yale did when football was completely different is now happening, and it's incredible. And then they beat the University of Miami on Monday night in a thrilling game. I mean, it's absolutely back and forth kind of game, and really went down to the wire. And they are the college football national champions. And of course, the question is, how in the world did the team with the most losses in the history of major college football become a team that goes undefeated, wins 16 games? That hasn't happened in over 100 and something years, and wins the national championship? And the answer is they got a new coach, and they only got him 2 years ago. His name is Curt Cignetti, and he'd never been the head coach of a major college program until he was 50 years old. He was an assistant coach for almost 30 years before he got his first head coaching shot. And I'll tell you what, it wasn't even a Division I job. It was Division II. In fact, it's kind of funny because the name of the school is Indiana University of Pennsylvania. There's a school, yeah. There's a school named Indiana University of Pennsylvania. It's Division II. At the time, he was assistant coach at Alabama, and in order to take the job, to finally become a head coach at 50, he had to take like $100,000 pay cut. And his wife was like furious. She's like, we got 2 kids in college. What are you, crazy? You can't be taking a pay cut. We need a pay increase. But that was the only way to get a head coaching job. He coached there for like 5 or 6 years, and then he went on to Elon College, which is a school in North Carolina. It's a really like a hidden gem. They recruited one of my sons. They have a beautiful campus in Burlington, North Carolina. They have a really nice little stadium. It's a solid Division I AA, or what we old school AA, now they call FCS, Football Championship Series School. The other Division 1A is called FBS, Football Bowl Series, and it's funny because now there's a championship in FBS, but let's not get too confusing here. So he goes to Elon, and he's not there for long, and then James Madison, another FCS school at the time, hires him, and he goes to coach at James Madison. They transition to a Division 1A FBS school, and in his first year, before they transitioned, and they were still in the Division I AA, the FCS, where they had a playoff long before the Division 1A ever had a playoff, they went all the way to the championship game. So he actually already has played in a national championship game. He lost that game. He did not lose this game on Monday night. So just let that sink in, that here's a guy, and I'll just, for those of you that know football, you'll understand this. I'll try to, explain some of this stuff. I realize jumping back and forth even between FCS and FBS, and some of you are like, what? Division 2, the old one was Division 2, Division 3, Division 2, and then Division 1 AA, and then the Division 1A. The Division 1A are all the top biggest schools, the ones that you would all know, in Alabama and Georgia and USC and Michigan and Ohio State and all those schools, and the schools that are always the national champions when you think of a national champion. He couldn't even start at that level. He couldn't even start at the FCS AA level. He had to start at Division 2. The only thing lower is Division 3. Here's where it gets even crazier. He was never a coordinator. Now, in football, you have a head coach, then you have an offensive coordinator. He's over the offense. You have a defensive coordinator over the defense. And then there are other coaches, tight ends coach, linebackers coach, offensive line coach, special teams coach, strength and conditioning. And it gets, running back coach, it gets more and more specialized. But you work your way up from what's called a position coach to a coordinator, and then you become a head coach. 50 years old, never been a coordinator, which is really strange. In fact, you could argue that if you're not a coordinator before you're 50, you should probably not be a coach anymore. Like you should probably get another job because like you're unpromotable. Like if you were good enough, you would have been promoted already. So it's crazy. It's just a crazy, crazy story. And again, I want you to get this. This is a guy who never was a coordinator and could only get a Division II job at 50 years old and took a pay cut to do it. And then he starts to work his way up. Now, few years James Madison, and now this is his record, 119-35. That's really, really strong coaching record. Took his teams to the postseason 9 times in 13 seasons that he was a coach up to that point. Also very strong. So he proved that he was a winner, that he was a program builder, that he was a culture changer, and that he was a coach who'd been overlooked for years. And so finally, he gets his chance to be a major college coach at 62 years old. Who's going to hire him? The losingest program in major college football. That's who. Now, you can't make this up. I mean, these are all just the absolute basic facts. Now, it is true Indiana's in the Big Ten, and the Big Ten has the Big Ten Network, and all schools get a share of the revenue, and that was certainly appealing to him, for sure. The second thing that was appealing to him was the fact that college football has gone under a massive change, and there's something called the transfer portal. By the way, I tried to participate in something like this back in my playing days, and I wasn't able to do it because you have to sit out a year. In the old days, you couldn't even play football for a year. Now, not only can players move, but now there's money. It's called NIL, name, image, likeness. That's what NIL means, name, image, likeness. They can make money from their name, their image, and their likeness. And they're making money that is professional football player type salaries. Now, not the same, like if a college quarterback's getting $5 million, a pro quarterback's getting $50 million. I'm talking the top pros. So you can see there's a definite difference. But if I told you that you were 19 years old and you could make $5 million, I mean, come on. But there are guys, kickers, that are getting $50,000 or $100,000 just to kick a football. There are guys that are going to make several $1 million while they're in college playing football. He also knew that Indiana had a huge alumni base and that there was money there because Indiana is very famous for their basketball program, famous movie Hoosiers, Bobby Knight, their famous great coach, 3 national championships, undefeated season, by the way, which hasn't happened in years. That happened at Indiana basketball. Now it's happened at Indiana football. It's just remarkable. The third thing that he particularly saw is that he thought that the first year schedule was not that hard because they didn't have to play a couple of the toughest teams because the Big Ten is not 10 anymore. It's expanded to 16 teams, and so or 18. It's hard to keep track these days. So schools like USC and UCLA and Oregon are part of the Big Ten, which is crazy. So they were not having to play some of the toughest schools. In fact, what he considered to be the only really, really tough game would be against Ohio State. And so he took the job, and that was last year. And last year, they won every game except when they played Ohio State. And so that kept them out of playing for the conference championship because Ohio State went instead of them because there's an East and a West division now because it's so big as a conference. But they did still qualify for the playoffs. And then in the playoffs, they played Notre Dame and they lost. So they only lost one game during the regular season and then they lost in the playoffs. And a lot of people are like, well, that's your one flash in the pan season. That's it. It's not going to happen again. But in fact, that is not what happened. That is not what happened. Now, when he went to Indiana, is kind of famous thing he did, because he kept saying it over and over again. He went to the basketball arena in front of that huge crowd. He said, "I win, Google me," or "Google me, I win." This was his big thing. And then he would say this in press conferences, like, I'm a winner. I'm coming to win. I'm here to win. And so watch what's happened. In 2 seasons, that's always been the coach. That's as long as he's been the head coach of a major college program. Is two seasons in Indiana. They've won 27 games, and that's the most a coach ever won in his first 2 years at any school since the AP poll debuted in 1936. So over the last 90 years, since there's been a poll, since they've kept track of these sorts of things, he's the only one who's ever won 27 games. Here's another one. In 136 years that Indiana University has played college football, their winning percentage is a losing percentage of 42%, let's say. You have to be 50% to even break even, right? A winning percentage would be 51, very slight winning. This is Cignetti's winning percentage in 2 seasons, 93%. It's more than double. 42 and 42 is 84. 93%. Here's another one. In 136 years of playing football, Indiana had never had a 10-win season. In Cignetti's 2 seasons, both times they've won more than 10 games. And this season, he won the first Big Ten title for Indiana in 58 years. And that was a co-title, by the way. They've only won 2. In 136 years, they've only won 2 conference championships. He's been there for 2 years, and they've already won 1. Then he led them this season to an undefeated regular season. Then they went in the playoffs. And what did they do in the playoffs? They went undefeated. And by the way, they were the only team of the 4 that got a first round bye to win. All 3 seeds, 2, 3, and 4, all lost the first time they played in the playoff. After getting the first round bye in the second round, they lost. Only team not to lose. And then on Monday night, they won 27-21 over the University of Miami and became national champions. Holy Moses. You can't make that up. That's like a story for the ages. It's like a Hoosiers story. The one that they made the movie about high school basketball in Indiana. This is what you've got now. You've got a Hoosiers 2, and it's the story of the college football team in Indiana that just completely 180, completely turned this whole thing around. And you've got to put the credit on players, of course, but you've got to put it on the guy who brought in the players. You got to put it on the guy who led the whole thing. So, he's just built a culture, which every leader has to build a culture. I don't care what your organization you're talking about. Nonprofit, business, sports, church, you got to build a culture. He prepares relentlessly. He sets very high standards. He models exactly what winning looks like and what he wants winning to look like for them. He's created a belief through consistency, clarity, and confidence. He does not lack for confidence, which again, you could say, how does a guy who never even got a head coaching job until he's 50 and was never a coordinator, where's this confidence coming from? Well, it comes from the record previous to Indiana of 119-35. And now you just think about that. And of course now he's added to it. He's only lost two more games. So the 35 has only gone to 37. That's pretty stinking good. Whereas he's added now 27 wins, right? So he's up to 146. So he's now 146 and 37. I mean, that is a fantastic winning. That is like an Urban Meyer type winning percentage. But again, Urban Meyer did it at Florida and Ohio State. This guy did it at lower levels of football. But a record's a record. He's fond of saying things. He says a lot. Talks about habits. He talks about consistency. He's got this one phrase: "You get freedom of choice, but not freedom of consequences." And that's a good one. You get freedom of choice. You can choose however you want to live and whatever you want to do, but don't think that means that you are free from the consequences of your choices. So that's the story. And what I wrote in the article and what I had in the LinkedIn post and what I want to focus on the rest of this episode today is, what about you? In other words, what does this story say to you? It's a great story about someone else, but what about you? He waited a long time to be a major college head football coach, 62. And maybe you've been waiting for a long time for your dream to come true. In fact, maybe you're I think it's passed me by. Maybe you're like, I'm 50, I've never been a coordinator. I'm 60 and I still haven't gotten my dream job. And you might think it's too late, it's over. And maybe you're just wondering, why hasn't it happened for me? Why hasn't it gone as I hoped? You feel like you've done the right things, but you haven't gotten the right results. Yeah. So it's a very legitimate question to ask yourself. But it's also incredible to think that that's probably what Curt Cignetti was asking himself not all that long ago. And look where he is now, from overlooked to undefeated. It's an amazing, amazing change. So, how do you think it happened? I think it happened, as I've studied him, first of all, with this absolute truth, which is preparation. And preparation takes time. And success is when preparation meets opportunity. And Cignetti's background was preparing for him for this. Now, his father was a coach, college football coach. So he was around it, and he worked for some other great coaches. I mean, he was at NC State, working with Phillip Rivers. Okay, that's like a future Hall of Famer. He was at Alabama, receivers coach, working with Julio Jones, another future Hall of Famer. So he was, coached for Nick Saban as his wide receivers coach and his recruiting coordinator. And by the way, that's a little piece of very important information, because probably his number one talent is his ability that he can evaluate players. That's how this transfer portal works. I evaluate you and I think you're good enough for us to offer you some NIL money so you'll come here and play for us. And his quarterback that he got this year, Fernando Mendoza, started his career his first offer was from Yale because he's a really good student. And only at the last minute did he get an offer from Cal, a major college football program and highly academic as well, Cal Berkeley. So that's how he ended up going to Cal, because he played high school football in Miami and they never offered him a scholarship, and nor did any of the other Florida schools. And then he started out as a third stringer, and then he finally got on the field, but they didn't have that much success. But Cignetti saw talent in Mendoza, and he felt that he could work with him. And by the way, how did that work out? His quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, won the Heisman Trophy. That's the highest award in college football. That means you are the best player in the entire country. So he, I think, learned a lot about how to evaluate talent through his years. He came through, lower divisions of football. He proved, once he became a head coach now, he proved that his systems and his philosophy work. So you could say it took him years to become an overnight success. It's like, oh, he's like an overnight success. Everyone knows who he is now. I mean, it's funny. I mean, you got people saying that he's like the greatest coach ever and all this stuff. It's pretty funny because, you know, like the Urban Meyers, who has an unbelievable, look him up, Google him. You talk about an unbelievable record, multiple undefeated seasons, multiple national championships. Really a phenomenal coach. And of course, Nick Saban with the most championships. But you can go back in football, you know, like Knute Rockne or Bear Bryant. I mean, there's been some incredible coaches, so I'm not sure we need to put him there yet. But hey, I would also say to you, just as far as like you're waiting, just there are people, you know, in that have really had late starts. For instance, okay, Vera Wang, the fashion designer, she didn't even enter the industry till she was 40 years old. Or how about the founder of McDonald's, Ray Kroc? He sold like paper cups and milkshake mixers, and he didn't start building McDonald's till he was 52. Or how about Martha Stewart? She didn't start her cooking and homemaking empire until she started a catering business in her 40s. And maybe the greatest story, you know, Harlan Sanders, Colonel Sanders, Kentucky Fried Chicken. He didn't start Kentucky Fried Chicken until he was 62 years old. Same age that Cignetti was when he first got his first major college football job. So, you know, and we have the oldest president right now, President Trump. I mean, usually you're not this old and you have the most important job in the world. So don't be so hard on yourself. You know, we think, well, we should be here. You know, we should reach this level. We should accomplish these goals, and then we're not there yet. And so then we put all this unnecessary pressure on ourselves, and then there's anxiety and stress and self-doubt. And the fact of the matter is that everyone's journey is different and unique. And as you just heard from some of these people, like a Cignetti, it happened later in life. So just because it hasn't happened for you yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. You're not too old. Time has not passed you by. Age is just a number. You determine your destiny. It's not too late for you. Sometimes you have to wait longer than you want to, but it will be worth it. Sometimes there's rejection, but really it's just redirection into where you're supposed to be. All this time you're preparing, you're gaining wisdom, you're gaining skills, so that when you finally get the opportunity, like Cignetti, in 2 years, goes from greatest loser program to national champion program, because the years in obscurity, you go into the Bible, like the story of Moses, 40 years in obscurity, then he leads his people out of Egypt, and one of the greatest leadership roles of all time. Maybe there are, like desires in your heart, hopes that are not being realized. And perhaps you just come to believe, like, no matter how hard I work, no one seems to notice. Not gaining the ground I want to gain, and you may grow tired. Like, I'm doing all the right things, I'm practicing all the right principles. And I just want to say to you, there's going to be a moment when all your hard work's going to be recognized. Just like Cignetti, there's going to be a moment for you when it's going to happen or begin to happen. Because, you can talk about it happened when he got hired at 62, major college, or it happened when he just won the national championship, or you can argue that it happened at 50 when he finally became a head coach and ran his own program. That's when it started happening, and 15 years later, we're at the summit point. But the fact of the matter is, friends, is this is a story that should encourage you, and it should inspire you. Overlooked to undefeated. It should just inspire you. You're not too old. It's not too late. It can happen for you, just like it happened for Cignetti. Let this story just be an encouragement to you and an inspiration to you, and motivate you to keep after it and keep going for it until you reach that dream fulfilled. Have a great week.
You've been listening to the Point of Impact podcast with Rick McDaniel. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to you joining us for our next episode.